we will get started. Okay, welcome everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Joanna Rivera, the Communications Director for the Oregon Department of Revenue. We've set up this media availability as an opportunity to ensure that we can answer your technical questions today and provide technical expertise about state tax compliance for cannabis retail licensees. So with us today, we have the Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission Interim Executive Director, Craig Prinz, and we also have the Oregon Department of Revenue Director, Betsy Einholt. So to ensure a smooth process today, I'm going to go over a few things. Please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom to ask a question. We will take questions in the order hands are raised. Please identify your name and the organization that you are with before asking your question. And our goal today is to manage our time efficiently to ensure that we can answer as many of your questions as possible. And we intend to take questions with a hard stop at 4:30. You can follow up with me or the OLCC contact Mark Pettinger afterwards for additional questions. Our contact info is listed in the notice you received for the media availability, and I'll also place that in the chat. And there's also a FAQ that outlines additional information. I'll also put a link to that in the chat as well. So with that, I want to turn it over to Director Prinz and Director Einholt to each introduce themselves, and then we will be able to begin the Q&A.
Thanks, Joanna. Betsy, if it's okay with you, I'll introduce myself first. So, hello everyone. My name is Craig Prinz. I am the Executive Director of the OLCC. Started about 90 days ago. So I'm here looking forward to working with Director Einholt to answer your questions. And thank you for joining us today.
Hi, everybody. My name is Betsy Einholt, and I serve as the Director of the Oregon Department of Revenue. So happy to be with you today and hopefully answer your questions.
Thank you. And so with that, we will begin taking questions. So I will put the link to the FAQ in the chat, and then we'll begin. So please raise your hand to ask a question. Okay, Julie, please go for it.
Thanks. Julia Shumley with the Oregon Capital Chronicle. Could you walk us through some of what the timeline is going to be for these certificates of compliance? I know there's some reference to rulemaking that the agencies have to do.
Yeah. Betsy, Director Einholt, I can take a first crack at the timeline because I think a lot of the timeline is going to be, that's the technical piece that involves rulemaking. So we want to use our rulemaking authority to put this certificate of compliance into our retail cannabis renewal process. So to do that, I've asked the Department of Justice to work with my staff, and we're coordinating with Ms. Director Einholt's staff. So this last week or so of May is really going to be about making sure we've got draft language. We're shooting for the June 15th commission meeting. So the June 15th commission meeting is when the OLCC can look at draft language. That language needs to be to the OLCC by June 16th. So that's really when we're looking to have the temporary rule up for the commission to look at and to vote on it. And then at that same June 15th meeting, we will also be opening the permanent rulemaking process. And the permanent rulemaking process is really where we can do kind of the hallmark of that is making sure that there's public comment, that we have a rule advisory committee, so participants in the industry can speak into the rule process and make sure that this is, again, that we can unfold this and get this done and make sure that folks understand how to get their certificate of compliance. And, I think then we're going to coordinate with Director Imholt to make sure once we get that temporary rule in place, how do we actually, how do we actually phase in the compliance piece? Ms. Imholt, I don't know if you want to, I keep saying Ms. Imholt, Director Imholt, if you want to speak to that, but we want to make sure that we phase it in so that as people's licenses come up for renewal, they know, hey, I need to get a certificate of compliance. How do I do that? And we would then, we would like to have the Rule Advisory Committee and everything around the rulemaking process done in August. We would have a meeting on August 17th. If we need to extend the rulemaking, it would be September. And so that's the rulemaking process. And then we'll want to make sure that we have communicated how people, get their certificate of compliance from the Department of Revenue. So I'll hand it off to Director Imholt on that piece.
Hi, thanks, Craig and Betsy. It's fine. I will just add that the DOR piece of this is actually very simple. It's an existing process that really anyone can access right now. You go in through our website on our portal called Revenue Online, and you or anybody can ask for a certificate of tax compliance. And then we do the checking on this side, and then the certificate gets either mailed to you, faxed to you, emailed to you, however you want to receive it. So this is a process that already exists. We do many of these already. So we would just be providing that same service to this group of folks that Craig's talking about.
Thank you, Betsy. And next up is Elise.
Hi, my name is Elise Haas. I'm with Coin 6 News. I have a couple questions, but I'll start with one. I was just curious if there was ever discussions during the development of the licensing process about this and whether maybe it was nixed early on. And then I'm just curious, what kind of information does the OLCC and the Department of Revenue share up until this point? Was it a two-way street? Was it a one-way street? Was there even a street? Because the governor put out in her message today that the cannabis industry does have a higher rate of non-compliance when it comes to taxes.
Sure, I'll start. I think, Elise, correct me, the beginning of your question was around, did this conversation come up in the beginning of the program, basically?
Correct.
Okay, great, thank you. What I can share with you is that this has been an ongoing conversation for years and years. Whether it was discussed at the exact time that the program was being created, I actually don't know, but I do know it goes back years. And I actually know that as recently as 2021, almost exactly 2 years ago, there was a conversation about this between DOR officials and OLCC officials on the record before a legislative committee that this was going to happen. So for whatever reason, it never quite got across the finish line until, now we're poised to do that. But it has been an ongoing conversation for quite some time between the two agencies. The second part of your question, go ahead, Craig, sorry.
I just wanted to add, I mentioned at the outset, I came in on February 15th. And so, with me coming in, it's a new opportunity, new leadership. I have a new chair. So, I think we wanted to work with DOR once we realized that this was possible through our existing rulemaking. We really felt like we could take action. And so I think that's part of why I'm here, frankly, is to look at things with new eyes. And once we did that, we knew, DOR is going to be a great partner on this issue of how to get people into compliance. What's the best way for this segment of licensees? Sorry, Betsy, I'll turn it back to you.
I just wanted to address the second part of your question, Elise. I think it was around information sharing between the agencies. And I know there is information shared between the agencies. I couldn't really tell you off the top of my head what the level of detail is, but I know there's ongoing existing processes in place amongst our staff for sharing information about the program.
That's very helpful. And then if no one else, if there isn't other hands up, my other question is, if somebody, say, is behind in their taxes and you realize that they need to come into compliance, if they aren't able to come into compliance and then get, their license renewed, I was curious, how is that going to work for them to be able to pay their back taxes if they're not able to make revenue? And we already know that the industry overall is kind of in turmoil and struggling. So that's my main question there.
Thank you, Elise. Craig, I'll take a shot at that. I think it's really the same question that really affects all taxpayers, which is they incur a liability and then they are due to owe that. And, sometimes for whatever reason that may be going on in their life or their business, they're having a hard time meeting their financial obligations. So I think the main message from us is that, you want to hit it head on. You want to engage with us directly. We do have tools available to us, including going into an agreement or a payment plan with any taxpayer, and it's in fact a taxpayer's right to do so. And so those are ways that we can help the taxpayer just get off on the right foot. And you're right, in general, we don't really prefer the revocation of licenses, because then it makes it really hard to get the money that the state is due. So we prefer someone to be working with us, for them to be in business, so then we can collect the revenue that Oregon counts on. But it has to be, they have to follow a DOR approved payment plan, and that's something that we would work with each taxpayer on.
Thank you, Betsy. And next up, we have Sophie.
Hi there, this is Sophie Peel with Willamette Week. I had a couple of questions. I think this one's probably most suitable for you, Director Imholt. But do you know what percentage of marijuana licensees that are delinquent on taxes are on payment plans?
I don't.
Okay. And then this one's probably for you, Craig, but historically when the OLCC has received a list from the Oregon Department of Revenue of non-compliant licensees, what is the process of what the OLCC does with that information?
Sophia, I really just came in February, so I can't speak to what was done historically. What I do know is, as Elise and Director Imholt talked about, the revocation process, talks about who has made their quarterly payments, who has not. And so I think this is just a much more functional, more proactive approach. As Director Imholt said, we wanted people to contact DOR, get into a payment plan if they need to. So I really can't comment on the past, because I really wasn't here for that historical background. But I'm when I talk to when I talk to Department of Justice and I talk to Ms. Imholt about the ability to do this through the renewal process and through a certificate of compliance, where we can bring people into compliance rather than what Elise mentioned, I just really felt like this was the right way to address this. And I'll just say that this is an iterative process. It's step one, and this is an evolving market, obviously. And we want to make sure that we're stepping here first, where we see the non-compliance rate, and we have the ability to act now. So I don't know if Director Imholt has any background on the kind of the history of it, but I just don't. I'm sorry, because of my short time.
Yeah, well, I know that it sounds like the DOR first started sharing those reports about non-compliant licensees in 2020. So, I know it's a fairly new thing, but I'm very curious to know, how many different licensees did the DOR include in those reports for being delinquent on taxes, and what the OLCC did with that information, if anything. But maybe those are some follow-up questions that I can put in writing. Just one more question about this process. When did you guys first start discussing these new rules, and what prompted it?
Thank you, Sophie. Like I said, this has been going on for quite some time, but obviously there was a change in leadership at OLCC, and folks here were like, we need to make contact with them. And so I reached out to Craig. I literally looked it up today because I thought someone might ask on April 13th to ask for a meeting to discuss this very topic.
Thanks. And did that have anything to do with the reporting on Lamoda?
I mean, I think the reporting has been, highlighted the issue, but just like one more thing that contributes to the need to have the conversation.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, Director. And next up, we have Annette.
Hi, this is Annette Newell. I'm with KXL News Radio. I'm glad you're doing this. I had a couple of questions just about the non-compliance rate for these businesses is approximately 9% with 823 licensees. That would be approximately 80 businesses that are non-compliant. So not a huge number. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's correct. Those are the basic numbers. And thank you for that. Because I think we always want to come back to this is a 90%, 10% issue. Most of the folks in this industry are paying their taxes. We don't want to lose sight of that, but we see that 9% rate, and it's higher than other areas, and we want to address that and get more folks into compliance. So I think that statement is accurate. Director, do you want to follow up on that?
Well, I just want to have full transparency here in that because I'm not sure it's based on licenses. I think it might be based on money, that rate, but I need to double check that and we can get an answer to you to make sure we're describing what the denominator is, if you will, if it's actual licenses or the amount of money.
And secondly, what would the amount of money that the state is missing out on that would be recouped by basically fixing this tax compliance?
Good question. We'd have to get the numbers on that. I'm sure folks have it. We'd have to get it to you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And next up, we have Elise.
I'll let Julie go before me since I've already asked a question.
Okay, thank you. Julie?
Yeah, this is for Director Imholt. Can you walk us through some of the difficulties that the Department of Revenue has had in collecting tax revenue specifically from marijuana businesses because they are a cash-based industry? I know there are some references to that in the FAQ. What kind of tools are not at your disposal with this kind of industry that would be with other businesses?
Thank you, Julia. I think there are a number of tools that are outlined in the FAQ that we use in tax collections, which I think most tax collecting agencies use. And in some cases, and not all, but in some cases, some of those tools are limited because if they choose not to bank their money, for example, many do, some don't, that's going to limit our ability to see the records and to really get an assessment of what's going on. The cash-based systems are always going to be more challenging. And also one of the, big tools that collectors use is to garnish, bank accounts. And that's obviously not possible if they don't have one. So those are just a couple of the examples that make any sort of cash-based business more difficult to collect on.
Thank you. And next up, Elise.
So here's what kind of the thoughts that I'm getting after hearing you guys talk. Do you think that, some businesses in the cannabis industry have maybe taken advantage of the lax rules just because it's been difficult to navigate their, cash businesses, or they haven't been able to get the cash flow or revenue that they maybe anticipated? And so this will just be one more way to coerce them to be more responsible with their money and their spending.
I think yes, Elise. I do think that cannabis businesses have, they're in a new industry in a very unusual regulatory environment that also is changing. And so all of that makes for a dynamic situation for them. In addition, some of the things that businesses use, common, access to capital, bankruptcy protection, things like that, they're not available to them. So they're just operating in a difficult environment. And I think in some ways that's much harder for them compared to just any non-cannabis business. So I think all of that it contributes to the, their business situation and how they make their choices.
Thank you so much, Director Imholt. So with that appears to be the end of our questions. And I just want to thank everybody for attending. And please feel free to follow up with either Mark or I with any additional follow-up questions. Thank you all so much.
Recording stop.